All right, in this video, I want to talk about something that this guy brought up. I just stumbled across him. This is Jake Denny's. I'm assuming that's how you pronounce his last name. And you can see that I just watched this video on the bottom left. And in the video, he was talking about two previous videos. And it's not the one with the dog next to it, but the two before that, where he was talking about the 8 days before the rapture. And it was an interesting point of view, and I want to take some time to think about it and to talk about it and share it with you to get your 2 cents on this whole thing. Now, his point of view was looking at basically where you see in the Old Testament when a child is born, that the woman would be unclean for a certain amount of time, and you would have to wait the 7 days for the child to be circumcised. And when I was thinking about that, I was like, yeah, that's what happened with Jesus. On the 8th day, he went to the temple, and he was circumcised, right? So you look at Jesus, and you can see a depiction of the birth of the church, because we are one body, right? So when he's born, we're born. And on the 8th day, that's when he is taken to the temple, and he's circumcised. Circumcision is a representation of cutting away of the flesh, right? And it's a sensitive part of the flesh that is goes after, I would say, lustful the pleasures of the earth and flesh of the physical world, right? And that is cut away, and again, the child is taken to the temple. So you can see a depiction of a rapture there. And his foundation was basically that in Revelation 12, talking about how the woman gives birth to the child, but then the dragon tries to devour the child as soon as it is born. And this might be a reference to, as this person was putting it, as when before we're actually raptured, we're going to be changed in a moment, in the twinkle of an eye. And then we're going to be here for about 7 days because we just touched an unclean thing, our dead bodies, right? We shed our dead bodies. Now we have to wait 7 days before we can go to the temple, right? So I was like, oh, that's very interesting. That is very interesting. That's a possibility, because Jesus at one point opens up the scroll of Isaiah and starts reading from it, talking about how he is preaching the acceptable year of the Lord. But in Isaiah, there's a comma where the sentence continues and talks about the vengeance of God that's going to be poured out on the world. Paraphrasing there. So you notice he stopped, right? And there's apparently a 2,000-year gap in just that one sentence, right? The acceptable year of the Lord happened about 2,000 years ago. And now, about 2,000 years later, we're going to end up seeing, well, some of us aren't going to see it, but we're going to know about it, about the wrath of God being poured out, right? So there's a 2,000-year gap in that sentence. So it's quite possible when Paul was saying, oh, in a moment, in a twinkle of an eye, you're going to be changed, right? But that doesn't mean in that same time you're going to be taken up in the air, right? It's very possible. And I've been thinking about that lately anyway, because when Jesus rose from the dead on first fruits, many of the saints rose up with him, right? And they walked around with Jesus around 40 days. So it's quite possible that that is something that happens. Like right before the dispensation changed from Judaism and turned into Christianity, the dead were raised and they walked around for a little bit. So maybe before the change happens again, the dead will rise and walk around for a little bit, right? And that might be something that actually helps get people to give their lives over to Christ during the time of Jacob's trouble, during this time of tribulation, right? So that they can get right with God. And since they rejected the gospel now, they got a chance to now get fired up, kind of like a doubting Thomas, right? Where the other apostles, they believed, but Thomas was like, no, I'm not going to believe unless I see it, right? And it's kind of like, okay. Jesus does that. All right, you don't want to believe? Well, blessed are those who haven't seen and believe. But now that we're switching from the age of grace to an age of faith and works during this time of Jacob's trouble here, going pretty much back under the law for the most part, now you're not gonna have to go by faith, right? Other than faith in that God's gonna reward you for committing yourself to Him, but you're gonna see some crazy things. So why wouldn't they see us changed, or even our loved ones that have died in Christ wake up and walk around for a bit with us? And I was thinking that's a possibility. I'm not going to say that's what's actually going to happen, but there seems to be some truth to that. And when I was listening to this guy, I was like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. Like what he was saying didn't seem far-fetched at all. And when I was thinking about it, I was like, all right, well, there's other ways we can take that, right? Now, 7 represents perfection, right? A divine perfection, a divine completion, right? So when you're born again, until the time that you actually die or raptured, that could be that 7-day period. It represents your life, right? And on the 8th day, that's when you're taken, right? You're taken to heaven. That could represent that, right? It can also represent a day for a year, right? A day for a year, so that when we have, for example, something this guy mentioned was the Revelation 12 sign of Virgo, right? The constellation of the Virgin, who was clothed with the sun, had the moon under her feet, had a bunch of stars, 12 of them at the head, to give her a crown, right? So that was a sign that happened in fall of 2017, if I remember correctly. And if that represents the birth, right? Well, then you have 7 years. So you got 2018, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. And then on the 8th day, 2025, that's when you would have the circumcision, or potentially the rapture, which is the year we're in right now, right? So there makes some sense to that, but he was saying he doesn't think that the rapture would happen on the Feast of Trumpets. He was thinking at the Feast of Tabernacles. And as soon as he said Tabernacles, I was like, yes, because I believe Jesus was born on the first day of Tabernacles. And then on the 8th day, he was circumcised. Now, I can't prove that without a shadow of a doubt, but I do know that he was born in the fall, and tabernacles can represent when God came and tabernacled with us, right? He joined us in physical flesh and walked with us, right? So, that feast could represent the rapture, where the first day of Tabernacles, possibly the dead in Christ, our loved ones that are asleep, rise up, and or we are changed in a moment, in a twinkle of an eye, and we have to wait around for 7 days for that feast in our new tabernacles, and then Satan is going to cast down a third of the stars, as we read in Revelation 12, when he tries to devour the woman. So the fallen angels that we are going to replace are probably going to come after us in some way, shape, or form. Not that we should be worried about that, but God likes to make things exciting and interesting, and so we're going to have a little bit of fun. And then on the 8th day, it's like we're circumcised. We finally cut off from this flesh completely and totally, and from this world, and we go to the temple as we make the temple, right? And I think this is a good way to end this video, because it will tie into a video I want to make on the 23rd of this month. I might do it a day before so that I'll post it on the 23rd. So and this is, I'm talking about September here, if you don't realize when I'm putting this up here. But this guy, he seems to be thinking that the 23rd is the Feast of Trumpets, because it seems like nobody is aware of God's calendar and how to tell the months, the times and the seasons, even though all these watchmen and women have been making videos over the years talking about God's calendar and how to use it, but all of a sudden they're not using it for some reason. They're just going to go by what the Jews say, even though there's been times where we've all noticed where Israel was a month early. And about every 3 years or so, they are a month early. And they are again. But I'm not going to get into that. I already gone into it in other videos. But we're just going to have to wait. Wait and then, yeah. So, with all that being said, thank you for watching. I hope you think about these things. I think it's interesting. And of course, check out this guy. I'm not familiar with everything he's saying and teaching. I just came across him. And what he said here, I thought was interesting. Now, if he's preaching something else that's I don't know about, don't act like I'm the one preaching it and that I'm promoting everything this guy says and does. I'm saying to check him out because of his view here is very interesting and is quite plausible. Right? I wanted to say plausible and possible at the same time. So, yeah. I just want to give my 2 cents on it. Talking about, again, how the 7 can represent 7 days, right? Literally, it can be 7 years. It can represent a completion, right? We also have the 7,000 years of creation in the physical world, right? So there's a few ways you can look at it, and it could represent all of them, right? Because the onion of truth has many layers, and each layer is true. You can't peel the onion and say, oh, the outer layer is true, but not the inner layer, or the inner layer is true, but not the outer layer. No, it's all true. They're just all different layers of the truth, right? So, with all that being said, thanks again for watching. Take care, and I will see you in the next one. May God bless you and yours.